Hey, what's up, Levi?
Hey, Joe. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. This episode of the Data Nerd Herd, we have Levi Davis. So, for those who don't know who you are, you want to give a quick intro?
I don't know if I can do a quick intro because I think what you want to talk to me about is going to require kind of a life story, but I'll try to make it as quick as possible.
Okay.
So I have a fairly typical resume, I think, for an analyst. I've been doing it about 10 years. I have a bachelor's in economics and a master's in statistics. For the first 4 years of my career as an analyst, I was doing more like stats, like marketing analytics stuff. Then I went and started working for Looker, and at that point moved over to the like BI side more.
hmm
And I've been doing that ever since. So for about 6 years, I worked for Looker for about 3 years, and since then I'm still doing almost exclusively Looker. In several different jobs, both consulting and kind of a normal job. Um, but I think what you're interested in is something that I was actually started doing before my career as an analyst. So I spent my 20s as kind of an adventurous kid, an adventurous college dropout, right? Who at the age of 21, I moved to Prague, and I did several odd jobs before I got into English language teaching.
hmm
And so I ended up doing that for about 10 years, teaching English language in the Czech Republic and then in Yugoslavia. And then I did it in the US for a while. And eventually I decided to go back to school. And that's where I finished my bachelor's in economics, and then I got a master's in statistics. Um, and at that point, I thought that my teaching career was done, because and so I moved into, working as an analyst. But something happened when I was working for Looker, actually. Um, when I interviewed for that job, I did not talk about my experience as a teacher at all. It wasn't even mentioned, but it didn't take very long. It was just a couple months of working at Looker before I realized that this organization really needed someone to create a training program, and I realized that I could do that because of my experience in teaching. And so I think I can't remember how long it took, but before my first year at Looker, I had the title of lead trainer, and I was developing Looker's training programs, both business user training, and the technical training as well. And then that situation ended up happening a second time with the job that I had subsequent to that. Again, I interviewed for this job as an analyst. I didn't talk at all about my experience as a trainer. But again, a couple months into the job, I realized that this company really needed a training program. And so I talked to my boss and say, hey, guess what? I have this skill that we didn't, I never told you about, but, I think that it would be very, very useful here. And that when that happened the second time, I realized that that wasn't an accident, right? I realized that I do think that having this skill set of a teacher is a really, really valuable skill set to add on to, for an analyst to have. Um, and so my most recent job that I've been at for a couple months, I actually billed myself as a analyst slash trainer, and it turns out that that was exactly what they were looking for. So I've kind of found my niche, and I think that, and I'm really excited about what training can add to what an analyst can accomplish. And so I think that learning at least the basics of like teaching best practices is a really good thing for any analyst to do. And I think we'll be talking about why that is.
hmm Yeah, I mean, I've taken your Looker course before.
I think you've taken it twice. I think I've
I've taken
taught
it
you
twice.
twice.
And for the
Yeah.
audience, it's not because I'm a slow learner. It's because I had to. There were two separate occasions for it.
I think it's
So
because you didn't use it after the first time, right?
right.
And because yeah, so that's one of the golden rules of training is you don't train people on something until they have access to it. And
Uh-huh.
so and have a reason. People have to have a reason to want to learn this. And so if you don't even have access to that tool, then you're it's not going to stick.
Nope, it doesn't. I find this in my own client engagements too. I mean, we do quite a bit of workshops and training, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on this. When you're teaching something to somebody, I think we're finding that if you can make it applicable to their use case that they're trying to tackle,
Yep.
it tends to go over really well. If you
Yep.
take too much of a kind of put that on the back burner and just provide rote examples, it might be mixed in terms of the effectiveness of the training. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think complicated thoughts on that because I agree
Uh-huh.
with you that a training is certainly going to be better if it can be a purely custom training on just the data that those people need to use. However, that really adds to the amount of prep time that it takes.
Hmm.
So if you get used to training something on, say, like your sales demo data set or whatever, you can just do those things really fast without having to do a lot of prep.
Hmm.
So there needs to be a balance there, right? And the way that I've kind of found that balance is that what I would do is in the first part of the training, I would do that just the training on generic data set. And then in the last part, if I didn't have the context about the data, like if it wasn't my company or if I didn't work there, I didn't know, I would actually invite someone to come in to talk about the specifics of the data that we're working with.
Hmm.
So it's a challenge. It can be a challenge to both be like efficient and not have to spend a lot of time planning your classes, but also to make your classes relevant. Because you're right. If people aren't actually trained on the data that they're going to use for their job, then they might not adopt it. Right. I think it's best to actually have them doing real analysis on real data in the classroom, and you've been successful when they actually start working in the classroom because they actually found some insights that's so important to act on that they just have to do it right then. That like as a teacher, that's when that your training has been effective.
I mean, how when you're giving a training, like how far time wise into the training until you can start seeing whether or not you're being effective?
Well, it should it that so gauging evaluating how well people are understanding the stuff that the ideas that you're trying to get across. That should be constant. So you should know immediately. So a class should be structured in a way that if people don't understand it, it's crystal clear. So and the way to do that is to make it as hands-on as possible. I
Hmm.
mean, one of the universally accepted best practices of teaching is that people actually don't learn by being talked to, right? Or talked at, I could say.
Hmm.
Uh, People learn by doing things, right? So you can also gauge the quality of your training by how little talking you do and how much hands-on work the students are actually doing. So it should be apparent immediately, and it will be apparent if they are actually doing exercises the whole time.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and harken back to your days teaching at the university too. But like, when would like something like a quiz be appropriate?
When would a quiz be? Well, it's kind of different because if you're teaching like in high school or in a university,
Uh-huh.
you actually can give quizzes and tests and things like
Yeah.
that. In a lot of business environments, people aren't used to that,
Hmm.
right? So sometimes you can do it. You have to kind of you have to frame it the right way and say,
Yeah.
this is just to make sure that I'm being effective in my job, and not, we're not testing you.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that's one of the challenges of teaching adults in a professional setting, is that adults aren't used to being told to do stuff. In fact, they aren't, a lot of people are used to going to some kind of training and not participating at all and thinking that they can just listen and then work on their email or something at the same time and actually get something from it.
Yeah.
But if you come to my class, that's not going to happen, because there's exercises from the very beginning. You're getting your hands dirty from the very beginning. Um, but I think the culture of business presentations is really, it's the opposite of everything that you want to do as a teacher, right? Mm. I
Yeah.
think when people do business presentations, they're basically trying to make themselves look smart, right? And so you don't have to define all your acronyms. You don't have to, like walk people through complicated ideas, because basically a lot of times when people give business presentations, they just want to blow people away and they want everyone to think they're smart, and that's it, right? But an effective class is exactly the opposite, right? If the teacher is giving the students the impression that he or she is really smart and understands this stuff way better than everyone, then that's just going to intimidate people.
Yeah. That's a good
Um,
point.
yeah. So I think when people try to teach in a business setting, is they come at it from the perspective of like a normal business presentation, and that's really not the best way to do it. And I think you end up really alienating your students by talking over their heads.
Hmm. Yeah, because the student really needs to come to the answers on their own, right? I know one thing I try and do is incorporate a lot of open-ended questions. So questions that
Mm-hmm.
start with what or how, maybe when,
Right.
why puts people on the defensive.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but leave it open-ended because that forces people to think through an answer on their own rather than yes or no, right? If you ask yes or no questions, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Here's another teaching best practice. Pretty universally accepted too. You never ever ask the question, do you understand?
hmm.
Right? Because it does a couple things. One, it's intimidating, right? It puts a person who might not be comfortable, in this group setting with with maybe their bosses there and everything, in a position where they have to, one, evaluate how well they understand something, which is really hard to do if you're new to it. But two, you have to like admit that you don't understand, right? Like if you and I are talking, that will work, right? If you're teaching me about like data engineering, you can say, do I understand? And I am not going to be scared to say no, right? If I don't
Right.
understand. But uh, in a classroom situation, there isn't this level of comfort, there isn't this level of safety. So yeah, you don't want to ever put someone on the spot and ask if they understand. And yeah, the kind of questions that you want to ask are not gotcha questions of like, so if you wrote this code, would it air out or not?
Hmm.
Like uh, ask something like, so can you think of an example of a type of analysis that you would want to do with your job using this analytical pattern that we're looking at here? Yeah, so questions that get people talking about how they would do their job and how they would use this stuff to better their day to day is a better way to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. What are your thoughts on like making content? I mean, I guess simplifying it so there's the old cliche, like, say it so a 5-year-old can understand it, right?
Yeah.
Do you try to err on kind of simplifying
Yes.
your
Err
approach?
on
Okay.
err on simplicity always. Yeah,
Hmm.
because um, you can always add more material. You can always go on and do more stuff if people are understanding things. But if you make your material so dense that it's not working, you're hosed. There's nothing you can do, you know? So yeah, so I'd say, you know, teaching is an act of empathy. Teaching is about understanding where your students are, putting yourself in their shoes, understanding their anxiety about not knowing this stuff well, understanding they might have like math phobia or tech phobia or something like that. And understanding just what they do understand, what they are able to understand. And you start from there and you build them up. And, you know, to me, that's why I love teaching, is because I love the process of watching someone progress and get really excited about these new skills. So always err on the side of being too simple, and then you can always add more complexity, but you can't really take it away.
It seems to be what I've talked to other professors too. You know, they kind of say this, like the first class they do on a subject, you know, they've never done it before.
Yeah.
Um, that actually ends up being the roughest class, and typically they'll reduce the complexity by 50%,
Yep.
and then hack away another 50% subsequently, and to the point where it's actually a much simpler class, but it's a better student experience at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I'll brag a little bit. What one of my biggest one of the things I'm most proud of, like other than like children and family and stuff like that, is that I got a student nominated teaching award when I was in grad school teaching a intro to stats class.
Nice.
And I've always thought that the way that intro stats classes are taught just ruins statistics for people. You know, statistics has one of the worst, it probably has the worst reputation of any class in college, right? And I think the reason why is because most intro to stats classes just push too much, you know, and these ideas are really tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did, instead of going into like ANOVA and regression and all of these more advanced things, is the entire class was just about the t-test, you know? And like, you know, a t-test is so rich, like all of the different nuances of, you know, what it does and when it doesn't work and things like that. Um, it, it's plenty of material for an entire semester.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because I said, you know, if you think about it with statistics, like what's important with this stats class that they're forcing everyone to take? You know, is that you're going to make everyone in that class a statistician? No, it's that they can understand these big ideas of statistics. What it actually does is really amazing, right? Like, statistics allows us to quantify uncertainty, you know, which is that's just a weird thing to even wrap your head around. It's incredibly interesting. And so if I focus more on like all these cool kind of philosophical questions with the t-test and statistics in general, people really liked it, and I think they actually got something from it, you know. Because you're never going to learn how to do like multivariate regression and intro to stats class and just go and start doing science with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not realistic.
Yeah, whereas a t-test, like that's common, right?
Yeah, it's
But
common.
but there's a lot to unpack with the t-test too, because you get
Oh
into
yeah.
like every aspect of like the underlying stats. We're talking about just, you know, like central tendency, and various
Central
measures
limit
around
theorem.
that. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, there's yeah.
Yeah, and then also just like, are these, you know, these two experiments, like, are they similar or are they different, right? It's just being able to, yeah, no, that's awesome. I know the stats classes that I took that was in the pure math department, so I think they just like to bludgeon you over the head with
Yeah.
like proofs and all this other stuff. So
Yeah, and it didn't give you, I mean, maybe you're nerdy enough that you liked it, but I think it turns a lot of people off, you know? And I think that there's a lot of reasons to like it, even if you find the technical aspects kind of challenging. Like, um, yeah, but I think statistics departments are really shooting themselves in the foot by the
mhm.
way that they teach that intro to stats course. If you like think about psychology, right? Like half of everyone that goes to college takes the intro to psychology class and decides they want to be a psych major, right? And the reason that happens is because the psychologists, they aren't trying to teach everything in the intro class. They're just trying to get people hooked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really smart. So I think that's what, that's what like the data, stats and whatever other data, subjects should do is try to bring people in first. And then once they're into it, then you introduce the hard problems.
What I find interesting, you've seen an explosion of like data science education right now.
Yeah, you do.
But what I find interesting with some of the approaches is that I'd like your take on this. Like in some cases, like it just dives right into how to program in R or Python and just use libraries, and like that's data science. On the other hand, coming from a math background, I'm like, I think you're not going to appreciate or be able to really understand what's going on
Yeah.
unless you have the foundations
Yeah.
of math, stats, and all the other stuff. But then again,
Linear
these
algebra.
linear algebra is very important, right? But
Yeah.
these subjects are so unapproachable for most people that you get scared away. And it's like, well, I'll just learn the libraries and just, I guess, try and make do with that. Because it's amazing, actually, how many data scientists I meet who don't have a rigorous math background or a stats
Yeah,
background.
I think that if you don't have the background in probability and math, then you should be a business analyst. Like,
Yeah.
don't to be a good data scientist, you have to understand eigenvalues. You know what I mean? You have to be able to think in differential equations and things like that. And that's just not everyone's there. And me personally, like I think like I'm fascinated by that stuff, but I think I'm not super competitive in it. And that's why I make a better business analyst, because I am able to, the great thing about business analytics is that you have to be part of the business as well. And you have to understand the business, and you have to be able to talk to non-technical people. So that's really, the sweet spot that I've found is that I like to have one foot in the technical world and one foot in the non-technical, the business world, and help to bridge that gap, rather than being like the ivory tower, statistician or machine learning person.
Yeah, and I think for the audience too, like business analyst is not a dirty word. I know
No, it's
in the
not.
days of data science, everyone wants to be a data scientist, and like analytics is sort of like a four-letter word. Trust me, there's a lot of value and prestige in this position. You should think about it.
Oh yeah, and it's not easy to do well,
Hmm.
because I mean, the technical side might be easier, but still there's some pretty tough technical challenges. But the fact that to be an effective business analyst, you have to understand the business well enough to tell the business person that their idea for measuring this thing that they want to measure is not actually going to do it, and this is how you would actually measure that thing that you want to measure,
Hmm.
right? um, and I think if you don't have those soft skills, those business soft skills, what I've seen happen is the business says, all right, this is what we want to measure. Pull us this metric, and this is, and make a dashboard, and thank you very much, right? And a bad business analyst is going to say, okay, here you go, right? And what you really need to be able to do is say, well, you know what? I understand what you're trying to do with this new marketing campaign, and the way that you propose measuring it is not really going to get at what you really want.
Hmm.
So I propose that you do this instead. So yeah, it's not trivial to be a business analyst.
Not at all. I mean, yeah, you mentioned soft skills, and I think that's
Yeah.
underrated as well. I mean, ideally, the training of a business analyst would be as much the hard skills as the soft skills, communication, storytelling, negotiation. I got a friend who teaches a storytelling class at the university here, and he's actually written a book, Effective Data Storytelling by Brent Dykes. Shout out to my friend Brent. And this is like sort of the last mile problem, really, because like you can,
Yeah.
do all the analytics you want, but interpreting it, providing value, it's a much different skill set, and I'd say it's a very valuable one. So,
Yeah. Right. And
hmm
you need to kind of have like a little mini MBA. You need to understand everything that your business stakeholders are doing, which kind of means you need to have kind of all their skills plus all of the technical skills at the same time.
hmm yeah. It's tough to provide a training for that because it's like a lot of your that mini MBA is probably going to be on the job because you got to develop that domain
Uh,
expertise within your for that particular business. So once
right.
you
To provide a training to be a business analyst. Yeah.
yeah yeah it's an interesting one yeah because you're kind of this jack of all trades but sort of I guess I don't know. I mean, we both worked as analysts, so
Yep.
if we could, I think we both worked as pretty good ones too, because we managed to keep our jobs
Well,
and provide value. So, well,
you.
maybe, who knows? um, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, back on the training note, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
what what are some of the things that if you were to develop like a business analyst curriculum, for example, what are some of the things that you think somebody should know?
Okay. So we're going to take someone. So what's the starting point? I mean, so so about like creating a business analyst.
Mm-hmm.
I've so I am very confident in my ability to teach people how to develop in Looker. I've done that successfully for hundreds of people. And so when I'm looking to hire an analyst, I don't need them to know Looker, if we're going to be using Looker. I need them to meet the prerequisites that I've kind of figured out are the minimum that you would need in order to learn this stuff. And that would be, well, they need to be pretty strong in SQL, probably, right? And hopefully have some kind of background in business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that can save money, right? Because it's a lot cheaper to find someone that just knows SQL than someone who's actually an expert in Looker, right?
Yep.
Um, but if I didn't have that confidence in my own ability to train people to develop in Looker, I don't think I'd be able. I would have to make a more expensive hire to make it work, right? So yeah, I mean, I think the hardest part of your question that I'm going to have not be able to answer very well is how do you teach someone with hard skills the business soft skills that they need to know? And it's kind of like I think that comes from just exposure to the atmosphere, and I don't really know any shortcut other than just being a part of an organization and interacting with other people to eventually gain those.
Yeah.
So that's like that's probably the hardest part of your question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it can be taught, right? And so yeah, and I think that training should always be a part of hiring, like and I think that these business soft skills can be taught. I have never put a curriculum together for that. It'd actually be a really interesting thing to try to do, to put a curriculum together to teach someone with hard skills, but who's lacking soft skills.
Mm.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I think what you find is that it works with some people and some people it just doesn't. But there's something
Yeah.
to be like the person that's just in a hole, like writing code all day. Like that's cool. Like if that's what they want to do, they can still be useful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, well, here's a related subject. Um, if we decide that a good business analyst should also be a trainer, what do you do if you work, you decide that and you have like 10 analysts that work in your company, right? It's not really fair to go to these people who are hired to work as an analyst that never had maybe they never had any exposure to teaching a classroom or anything, and to say you guys need to be teachers, right? Because some of them are just going to flop, and I've seen it. Like I know really good analysts that just don't like teaching people, and you know what? That's fine. Like there's plenty of work for them to do, and so when I've been in situations where I want to teach analysts how to be trainers, I make it voluntary, right? So I have this whole like spiel, this half-hour long thing that I'll give about how awesome teaching is, how it can better your career, what are best practices, and what are the rewards and things like that. I will make that presentation, and then I'll say to the class, all right, I hope that all of you are interested in doing this, but if any of you just, if this seems awful to you, then don't do it, right? Like, and an organization can survive if you have like, 60% of your analysts that are good trainers and 40% that are better for just doing heads down work.
Yeah, yeah. It sort of reminds me of the career progression of being an individual contributor than becoming a manager.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think a lot of people should actually be managers.
Yeah, yeah,
Just like a lot of people shouldn't be trainers. I don't think that's a
yeah.
bad thing. It's just
A lot of
kind of
people
how it
shouldn't be
is.
teachers. I mean, think of some
Right.
of the bad teachers you've had in your life,
A
right?
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
For the audience, actually, Levi and I went to school together from junior high to part of, I guess, high
yeah.
school or college or whatever it was. But yeah, there are definitely some teachers. I was a bit amazed that they got their job and managed to keep it for that long. But I guess
Yeah,
it's
at all levels, at all levels. They're in
at all
kindergarten, they're
levels.
in college,
Hmm.
everywhere. There's bad teachers, and it's really unfortunate.
Hmm. But
By
there's
the
some
way,
great. What's that?
I was just gonna say, like so if you're interviewing a teacher, there's a really easy test uh, to find the good teacher as opposed to a bad teacher, and you basically ask them, do you enjoy teaching,
Hmm.
right? And if you ask me that, my question is, hell yes, I love it. Turn me loose on a classroom. I want to be there. You know what I mean? Um, the one of the biggest like red flags to identify a bad teacher is that they blame the students, right? Um,
So walk us through an example of when, like, how would you blame a student in that
oh,
question?
you know, I told them three different ways of understanding this thing, and still they don't get it. They're just dumb. Like, I don't think they try. Like, never blame the students.
Hmm.
Never do it. And, of course, sometimes the students deserve to be blamed. Like, if they show up to class drunk, you can't really
Well,
teach.
yeah, not my fault, man.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's not the teacher's fault. But I think just as a general philosophy, if a teacher is um, always has the perspective that they take it on themselves, the success of the class is up to the teacher, then that's how you're successful as a teacher.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good litmus test. Why is it that bad teachers stick around then? It
I
seems
think
like it's just a situation where it's like bad for everybody,
I
frankly.
think some
So,
people get off on the power, maybe.
huh?
You know what I mean? Because when you're a teacher, you have a lot of power over other people. And if you don't use that power in a beneficial way, then you're a bad teacher. But I think that's one thing. Like, they get off on the power. They don't have anything else to do. They just have no other career options. Um, which I don't know. It seems like, as poorly as like public school teachers are paid, you'd think that there'd be a lot of other options. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why bad teachers stick around.
Yeah,
I have some
I just
ideas.
think if you look at like the various careers and the impacts on people, right?
Yeah.
Like teachers or disproportionately some of the more impactful people in society,
Hmm.
and yeah, the fact that they stick around even if they like absolutely suck and have a negative
Yeah.
impact, it's like it sucks for them because they don't want to be doing this job. Maybe
Yeah.
they
Their
do,
life
but I'm
sucks.
sure they'd want to be doing something else. It's like, why do you
And
want to keep
then
doing something you suck at?
and then the students are really having a bad time. And then you're basically like ruining people's lives. I know it's horrible.
Yeah, like I remember, at the high school that we went to,
Are you going to
was it?
start naming names?
I'm not going to name names, but we had a good English teacher, I think, who was really good, and I think, you know,
Maybe he's watching. Yeah.
maybe he is. I think he was good. He brought out the best in people. But I could think of some others who, I think one of my econ teachers, I don't think of a chemistry teacher. I just thought that was an absolute waste of time to take that class. Like, I actually don't think I ever showed up for that class after a bit. So, um, and it kind of depends. But as a student though, you're subject to just having to spend time with these people for, several months, and like that, you can't get that time back. And so that's again, I
Yeah,
think
it's
that.
really tragic.
Mhm.
It's really tragic that there's, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think teachers should be paid better. I think
Yeah.
that would help. It would mean that mediocre people or poor people just wouldn't get work. Um, but yeah, it's again, the theme of this conversation is like the world would be a better place if more people became better teachers.
Hmm.
And I think specifically in analytics, I think it really goes hand in hand with because think about our jobs as analysts is basic. Like if we zoom out, our jobs are to make organizations more data driven, right? Our jobs are not necessarily just to build dashboarding tools,
Yeah.
right? Because you can do that all you want, but if people aren't using it, then you have not effectively made this organization more data driven, right? And so I think the key to making sure that people adopt the analytics products that you're building as an analyst is one, make sure they're like, you have to understand the jobs of the people that you're building this for well enough to know what kind of data they need and what kind of questions they want to answer, right? And if you have that reporting in place, when those people come into your class to get trained on the reporting tools that you've built, then um, then you're pretty much guaranteed adoption. That's when you see this,
Mm.
that's when you see people like actually finding important insights in class and actually, getting excited in class about how they can do their job so much better. I
Right.
mean, as an extreme example, it did happen one time that I had some people that were in a particular team in my class being trained, and I trained them on Looker and showed them how to use the Explorer that was there for their team. And they discovered something that was so important in class that they got up and left the class,
That's awesome.
which actually that was the most flattering thing. Like I think they were ready. Like
Oh yeah, you did your job.
I did my job. Yeah, exactly. That's how, like, and so ideally what you want is you want to see people like running after the class is over, running out of the classroom to go to their desk and sit down and just like start acting on all these amazing insights that they just found. That's what you really want.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, so I think that the ability to teach is highly complementary to a business analyst. I would almost argue necessary, and it is like kind of the last mile, like as you were saying, solution. That's the last thing that you need to do to get people using the analytics tools that you built for them.
I mean, that's interesting because I never really thought about that before, where training is part of that last mile too. Because I always, I've heard data storytelling is a last mile, but there's a bit of hair splitting, I'd say, between like storytelling and then teaching, right? Or is there?
Well, I mean, aren't we really teaching people to be able to tell their own data stories? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, sure. As an analyst, we have this skill. We can like, oh, I'm going to look into this topic for you. And then I'm going to here's a presentation. Here's some charts that I
Hmm.
make that answer your question. Like, yeah, I can tell a story with data, but BI is all about enabling the business people themselves to access that data.
Hmm.
So, yeah, ideally, I mean, of course, like data storytelling is an important like skill for an analyst to have, but I would say that is also one of the skills that we need to impart on our business users.
Hmm. That's interesting. I mean, you see this in some companies where like reports are widely adopted, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
and I think people
Yep.
understand the reports. In other cases too, where reports they're ignored.
Yep.
If you go into your Looker dashboard, for example, and don't see any user reports for months,
Yep.
it's probably an indication. I mean, how does a business analyst get more adoption for reports and metrics in dashboards?
I think it is important to, look at the reporting that you're building as a product, and do the type of analysis that you need to do to see like what parts of your product are and aren't being used. Yeah, so I think it's really important to, as like a success metric for, I mean, I think analysts, business analysts should have as like their goals, they should be gold on user adoption, because yeah, so what, you built a dashboard but no one's using it, it doesn't matter, right? Like, so I'm not going to goal you on how many dashboards you build. I'm going to goal you on how many people are actually using the tools that you're building.
That's an interesting metric.
I mean, yeah, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do, right? Like I think, a lot of analysts will just kind of, they only take it so far, and they say, well, we built some dashboards, but they're not using it. But the analyst has to be involved in that, involved in training people on how to use it, and then also just making sure and getting feedback on how is that, how are those reports, like what works for you and what doesn't. I mean, ideally, like if it's working well, they'll come to you, right? You don't need, like, if it's working well, what's going to happen is you give them access to some data, they're going to be just super stoked on it, and then they're going to come to you asking for more, right? And then you don't really need to gauge, you don't need to like look at how many times they've accessed the dashboard, because if they're coming to you asking for, well, we really want to be able to break it down by this and then by this and then by time and everything like that, then you know that they're using it, right?
So in that situation too, where you have a lot of excitement over data, I mean, what's the role of the business analyst training people to do kind of a more self-service approach with their analytics?
Well, I mean, I think, well, first of all, moving away from ad hoc, where every analysis is ad hoc and done by an analyst, and presented to the business by an analyst, moving from that to self-service analytics is absolutely a necessity, right? It just does not make sense. It is a complete waste of money, and it slows down the whole process by having the analyst be the gatekeeper of the data. So, I mean, I guess I just have to be careful about what kind of stories I tell about past jobs. But yeah, I've seen it really not work well, right? I have seen organizations where business people can't access any data themselves. Every bit of analysis they have to do is like this custom analysis that's done by, an analyst. And it takes like 3 weeks to go through that analyst queue and finally get your thing done. And by the time that happens, it's already over and it doesn't matter anymore, So, yeah. So moving to a system of self-service analytics is absolutely necessary. And it's also a challenge, right? Because we're kind of asking a bit more technically of the business person. We're giving them tools, like they don't need to write SQL, but they still need to understand. Well, so Looker's Explore, for example, is a really awesome like GUI environment that gives the business user access to kind of whatever, potentially all of an organization's data. But it's not super simple just to learn. It's not like looking at a dashboard where all of the charts are already there for you. You have to know what to click, and you add filters and stuff like that. There's actually a technical, it actually is a little bit technical. You kind of have to like describe the behavior of SQL without actually talking about SQL, because that's what Looker's doing under the surface, is just writing SQL. So for example, I mean, the hardest thing about teaching Lookers Explore, I'd say, is the difference between filtering a dimension and filtering a measure,
Hmm.
which in terms of SQL, it's the difference between a filter in the where clause and a filter in the having clause. Now that's
Right.
kind of hard to understand even for like, beginning analysts, right? So we're expecting, these business users to understand the difference between filtering on an aggregate versus filtering out values from the raw data before the aggregation. It's kind of challenging. It's definitely not impossible, but it does take some training. So we kind of need to um, expect more from the business user in terms of what they're doing technically, but we can't expect too much, and we need to be nice, and we need to be gentle, and we need to, like hold their hand through the process so they don't just get freaked out and everything. But yeah, I think that in this day and age, be having some amount of data literacy is just increasingly important.
Mm-hmm.
It's like typing, right? It used to be that only secretaries knew how to type. Now you kind of need to type to have a job,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say like the ability to do at least basic analytics is going to be like that. You're just like, if you can't do anything with data yourself, you don't have a very good resume, you know?
Yeah, you're kind of hosed these days. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
So I think we need to like,
what basic
yeah, go ahead.
analytics
Sorry.
look like to you though? Like for a
What is
business,
what?
for a business user though, like what are some of like the basic analytical skill sets that you think somebody should have to be it's useful?
I don't know. It's all in the context of people's jobs, right? So if you're in marketing, then you want to be measuring the effect of your campaigns. If you're in product, you want to be measuring how people are using your product and what parts of it are and aren't working, right? Um, I don't know. It's a hard question. As far as like big concepts that people need to understand, um, I think the big concepts come slowly. You at first you give them access to the most basic data that they need to do their job, and it's like, oh, here's a list of your customers that you haven't called in 2 months or something. Like, you can act on that, go act on it, right? And so then it starts this. I think that the way that people learn analytics is incrementally. You do a little bit of analysis, gives you some value. You're like, oh, that's awesome, I want more. And then it just becomes this iterative process that kind of drives itself. And it's very much like, drug addiction. It's like, once you get that hit off the data crack pipe, you want more and more and more. Yeah, you're addicted, right? So I think yeah, the great thing about getting people into analytics is that you only need to do so much before they just take off and start doing like learning on their own. That's ultimately what we want, right? We want to get people to the point where they're confident in their ability to learn, and they're interested in learning more. And at that point, they don't need you anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, um, I think it is a process that takes care of itself as long as you can give people the kind of gentle introduction that some people would require.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an interesting take, I think, on the role of a business analyst, right? And I do agree that
Yeah,
training and education and that kind of stewardship should be more part of the job ongoing, because it is as much about making interesting reports and insights as it is, uh, I think, informing people in a way that they're excited to continue learning more about
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah,
business and their role in it. And yeah, that's a good take, and that's a take I don't really hear that often either, right? Because it's like, well, to be a good business analyst, you need to know how to, definitely be great at Excel and maybe be good at R and all this other stuff, right?
yeah,
And so it's, but it's all tactical.
yeah. So
So
I think that I'm interested in this idea. Like, your podcast is called The Nerd Herd, right? And it's interesting how that term has evolved in our lifetimes.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like in the 80s, um, you called someone a nerd that didn't have a good social life because they were like just obsessively into, Star Trek or math or something like that, right? And it was a bad thing. But that term has evolved to the point now where we say if you're a nerd about something, it just kind of means you like it a lot,
Right.
you know? And it's not a bad thing anymore. It's a positive thing. And even the point where people might say, like, I'm a sports nerd, it's like, okay.
That's
That was never a nerdy thing before, but
No, you're not going to get like a swirly in the bathroom for
yeah.
like in esports or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, back when we were in school, I think that actually might have been a very realistic thing that would happen to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, times have definitely changed for the nerds. It's interesting. I mean, follow the money though, right? It's like I don't think a
Yeah.
lot of passionate nerds back then were making except if you say
Yeah.
Microsoft,
Massive amounts of money.
But
Yeah.
now, yeah, it's like kind of the exception. Like,
Right.
but it's called different things now. It's called, being. I do think you're right though. It's still a level of obsession about stuff or interest. But the internet sort of changed all that too. Where I think back in the day, like you had to really curate your own obsession without a lot of spoon feeding. And these days, I mean, you could be a nerd about practically anything,
Yeah.
anything you want.
Yep.
I
And
mean,
that's kind of what it means now.
hmm
But I
yeah, so
think,
you're sort of a dilettante in a bunch of stuff.
well, there's traditionally been this gap between people that call themselves nerds and people who don't call themselves nerds,
Hmm.
right? And I think that gap has gotten smaller and smaller. And I think that, like, I believe that we'd be better off if the whole idea could just go away, like that there
Yeah.
is any kind of separation because of technical ability or being interested in, math or computers or science fiction or
I have to
whatever.
change the name of the show though, man. Come on.
Well, yeah,
It'd
I
be called like
know.
the Data Herd or something. But no, I see your point.
Well, but what all I'm saying is, we don't need to get rid of the term nerd. We just need to let everyone into our club. You
Yep.
know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
Like,
everyone can join it now, right?
I
So
really, because I thought that you needed to take all 3 semesters of calculus. You need to be able to quote Monty Python extensively. Um, you need to have opinions on Star Trek. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's changing though. I mean,
Changing.
it's interesting. Like back
Yeah.
when I got into data in the early 2000s, it was very much a it kind of reminded me, like I always make the joke about that guy Milton in Office Space. He got the red stapler, like when he was thrown into
Yeah.
the basement. Like that's kind of how data people were treated back in the
Right.
day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you're sort of relegated to this back office IT and IT too. IT was kind of thrown into the back office
Right.
along with everything else. But then guess what? Technology changes things, right? And
Yeah.
now basically almost every company is a tech company, whether they realize it or not. They're utilizing technology, they're utilizing data in ways that they just were not back in the day. And so it's data and technology is very much what is fueling any business right now. And so you have to
Yeah.
have these skills. It's not the late 90s, early 2000s. You ignore these skills at
Yeah.
your own peril, frankly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very clear. That's very clear. So.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think if we could, like, bridge that gap as much as possible, it's going to make us more successful as analysts, because it means that we have, the people know how to use our tools and want to. And it's also going to be great for those people because their careers will benefit. And some people, I've had some people that I've trained, like in SQL, that have gone on to actually change their careers and go get a master's degree in data science or
I was
something
going
like
to
that.
say, like, the fact is that now instead of just learning skills specific to your job or skills specific to your industry, like you're learning a cross-sectional skill set now. You learn
Oh
SQL,
yeah.
you can go anywhere with that. I don't care
Yep.
what industry it is. Like you'll probably find work if you're really good, right? Or
Yep.
even mildly decent. Same thing with like being an Excel jockey, like that you can find work across different industries now. You're
Yep.
not like
Exactly.
you're not vertically aligned. You can cross horizontal. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yep. And it doesn't have to be the biggest thing that you do. Like it,
Hmm.
like basically I do this technical stuff and then I have this extra non-technical stuff that I do. But a lot of people, if you could work in HR or something like that, and 80% of your job is just like business soft skill stuff. But then guess what? You can also access your like lever data or whatever through SQL, and then you're just that much more powerful. And actually, we haven't talked about training SQL, which is something that
Yeah, let's talk about that for a bit. Yeah.
I have wanted to teach non-technical people SQL for a long time. And in my last job, I actually had a chance to try that. And it was awesome. I loved it. The people loved it. I mean, they ate that stuff up. First of all, there was a bunch of demand for the class in the first place. And then once we had done the class, there was a pretty like large proportion of the class that really liked it and wanted to continue learning. So I don't think that you're going to make an analyst overnight. Like I don't have, like, I know that it takes quite a bit of work to get good enough in SQL that you can kind of do anything that's needed to be an analyst. But learning basic SQL can allow you to answer more basic questions of data, right? And it can be valuable for just about anyone. And so I really enjoy it. Yeah. So and now I just kind of teach SQL wherever I go. Like in my new job, I announced that I'd be teaching the SQL lesson, and people came, and
That's
and
cool.
I've also like like just posted on LinkedIn, say, hey, I'm teaching this SQL class. Anyone want to come? So I enjoy it so much, and I think it's valuable enough that it's I don't know. It's become a part of me. Like teaching SQL to non-technical people is like a thing that I love doing, and it's a thing that lots and lots of people are interested in doing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I
Actually,
mean,
yeah.
so
What was
because
that?
like earlier you were talking about like these like data science boot camp things that in 3 months they teach you R, Python, SQL, Tableau, Excel. You know
All
what I
kinds of
mean,
stuff. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In 3 months. And the thing is, like, really, R is a tool made for statisticians. It's like optimized for matrix operations. It is not, like we said, R is, you can't just learn R and become a data scientist or a statistician. But with SQL, on the other hand, there's not a lot of technical knowledge that you need. You need to understand the properties of means and sums and things like that, right? But I think SQL is something that, so learning R is not going to make you a statistician, but learning SQL can actually make you a business analyst. And so SQL is approachable for someone without a technical background. It's valuable, like it's really, really a part, like valued for many different roles. Well, I thought there were three. So it's approachable, it's valuable. Oh, and I don't know. Let's stick with two then.
Awesome. I don't
It's
know.
good. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like I'm starting a class next week teaching at the University of Utah about a kind of advanced analytics using SQL, or
Oh,
advanced SQL
cool.
for
That's
analytics,
great.
or however we describe it. Um, but even then, people who have been using SQL for a bit, it's a prerequisite, and I think still people walk away. We use BigQuery, right? So we also teach
Mhm.
people um, how to do nesting of
Yep.
data, then teach them kind of advanced window functions, and might teach some forecasting in BigQuery, which is kind of cool because you can do machine learning
hmm
in BigQuery, and just teaching. Okay, so like it's not just kind of the routine, like select these fields, filter it, get the
Yeah,
data,
yeah.
right? But it's also here's some pretty advanced stuff you can actually do. Like if you have a JSON file, you can unnest these fields and do some really cool stuff with it. Um, you can do things with like window functions. When you teach window functions to people for the first time, that's an eye opener because it's like,
Yeah.
I can start thinking of my data in different ways and different ways of ordering it, and that's a whole new world. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the combination of window functions with subqueries or
mm-hmm.
CTEs Those
Yep.
two things together is what really makes you fluent in SQL and
Yeah.
really know how to do anything that you can describe in English, you can do in SQL if you have those tools.
Quick SQL nerd question. Do you
Yeah.
prefer CTEs or do you like subqueries?
Um, yeah, I might get myself in trouble here, but I like CTEs just because I think it's easier to read. And also, if you want to reuse a subquery more than once, then it makes sense to only define it once.
Cool.
What do you think, Joe?
I think you made the right answer.
Okay, good.
So I am a big fan of CTEs. I think subqueries are okay, but they typically make your eyes bleed after a while, and they're not really
God, I
reusable.
know. Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, yeah, trying to go through like a nested subquery is, I think, a form of corporal punishment almost for some people. So
Yeah,
that said, they happen a lot.
yeah.
So do other bad habits. So
So I wonder in your class, I mean, to create realistic conditions, um, you know, analysts don't get an assignment on a project to say unnest this JSON and form and like form a full table,
mhm.
right? Analysts get stuff like we want to measure this stuff, but we want to exclude all this stuff, and we have to take the biggest whatever accounts in these places, and it like the job of an analyst is that some business person comes to you and they describe this really complicated like scenario that they want to do, and you need to be able to think about that and turn it into a
Hmm.
query. That's and I mean I love that process. That's why I'm a total nerd about SQL. Like there's nothing more pleasant for me than to get a big juicy SQL problem and just put on some headphones and just do it.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like, I'm sure you find this when you're teaching too. Like, you got to teach the tactical approach, right? So here's how you're going to nested data first, but then, yeah, I think to your point, an assignment should definitely be, I just need to know this information, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
We need to know
then
this information.
not even gonna
Like,
tell you what tables it is. 'Cause as a business user, why would I have any idea where it's going to be? That's your job,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, it's interesting. Well, cool. I think we're coming up on time, but you want to plug anything you're doing, selling?
Um, I will. So I would welcome that any of your listeners reach out to me with questions about teaching or analytics. Like I said, I just love doing this, and I'll talk to anyone about it. So if anyone wants advice on like setting up a training program in your organization, whether it's technical or non-technical, go ahead and reach out. I will, and I should also say that I think that your audience is pretty technical, and they don't need SQL training. But if you do know some like business people that would be interested in that, feel free to like send them to me. I will very happily organize a class.
Cool.
And eventually I'd like to start getting paid for doing that. But like I said, I enjoy it. I enjoy doing that enough that I'll do it for free too.
Help Levi live his passion and teach SQL to the world. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I
wait,
want to teach people SQL.
how do people get a hold of you?
LinkedIn would probably be the best way.
LinkedIn. Okay, cool. So I'll put your contact info in the show notes.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Joe.
Yeah, of course. And have a great time. So
Yeah. Thanks a
thanks for being on
lot.
the.
Thank you. It was very, very enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, of course. Likewise. All right.
All
Take care.
right.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.